Oh, 1, 2, 3.
The
So
same.
we are the same, but we are on the lower end of the scale for a Pangdemonium production.
It's time to spill the tea. Hello!
You there, and welcome to
A Spoonful of Theatre. And this is another one of our Spill the Tea theatre review episodes where we review a local piece of Singapore theatre right outside the theatre foyer. I'm TJ, theatre director and theatre practitioner.
And I'm Sam, editor of language, literature, and self-proclaimed show business lovey. And what have we seen, TJ?
Well, we have just watched Pangdemonium's Force Majeure at the Victoria Theatre.
Yes.
So, Sam, first thoughts.
First thoughts. Actually, can I tell you about my pre-thoughts?
Oh, go, please. Yes.
Because a month or two ago, we would be really excited. This is Pangdemonium's first production of the season. But with their recent news, I'm kind of lamenting because this is Pangdemonium's first production of their final season. And it really hung over me as I was going into the theatre. And I think it will hang over me when we go see other productions. But I'm going to bounce it back to you, TJ, because this is quite cerebral. And I think you are the one to explain it. So tell us about it.
I'll be honest, this is where I think our formula of giving first thoughts straight after the show doesn't work for me because I need to go and process my thoughts for several hours. But we're going to give it a go, ladies and gentlemen, because this is a spoonful of theatre and a spill the tea. And I do wish I'd swatted up a little bit more before I came because this play is based on Anton Chekhov's The Three Sisters, which is a very famous play, which actually was very much around the birth of naturalism when Stanislavski, the famous acting practitioner, was also around. So it really cemented in its original form the birth of naturalism, where you see the day-to-day on stage, the mundane. So the idea is in this sort of play that we see the day-to-day on stage, okay, and everything else happens off stage. So all the drama you don't actually see. Now, in this adaptation that's been commissioned by Pangdemonium by Stephanie Street, which is not their first time collaborating with Stephanie Street, she has imagined it, I think, and here lies a bit of a problem that we'll get into.
Yes.
Even now, I'm not quite sure in some parts, but imagined it in modern day of bringing that story of these three sisters moving back to a small town where they were having big city life, and they come back to small town and not quite settling.
Okay.
However, I feel like a lot of the story, because it's an adaptation of the original, trying to make it modern day, got a bit locked and lost in translation because trying to pay homage to the original, but then putting it in a Singapore context when originally it was in a Russian context.
Yes.
There was a lot of barriers that I think could have worked in some areas, but in other areas I feel like it was trapped by its own adaptation.
Right.
And I've jumped right into my review there, not my first thoughts, but to help explain it, I think it needed that.
No, well, let's keep going then, because plot is something that I struggled with. But you explaining the Chekhovian, if that's the right term, idea, or Stanislavski, of the drama happening off stage and the story is the subtlety in the relationships on stage, then that makes complete sense. But where I'm going to give a criticism is pacing. I felt pacing was a little bit all over the place, that showing the subtlety of those relationships got quite lost in the pacing, where a lot of key information was thrown away. Key information to the plot, to why character relationships were happening on their stage, sometimes were thrown away. That's where I struggled with the plot, quite honestly.
I think for me, the point is of this Chekhovian style to see the mundane on stage as well, but there still has to be some element of entertainment. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I missed, and I think it's a few things I think that went into this, was relationships between the characters. I don't think they were fully developed enough throughout the piece, and I think it's a mixture of the writing pace.
I agree.
A lot of things sometimes just happened really quickly,
Yes.
or just like, where did that come from? As well as some of the performances, as well as some of the pacing of the direction through the show as well. So I think for me, that pacing came out in many different forms throughout the play.
I quite agree, especially when this is supposed to be a story of three sisters and a brother. There's a brother involved there.
Yeah.
I think you're quite right. Like when we think of, I mean, you and I both have siblings, and the closeness and the distance that can occur in those relationships between siblings, I felt more distance than I felt closeness, especially between brother and sisters. And I think, again, that was a victim of the writing, not necessarily the acting or the performance. I think it was a victim of the writing in that respect.
But I think actually there was moments in the story I could see why the story was an important story to tell. Actually, in its essence, this story is about holding on to creativity and losing it, and those elements. So I think those elements are really, really nice and are worth telling now. But if it's not told in a way that's exciting, then we kind of lose it.
Let's go on to that idea of creativity, because that is a massive theme of the play. The opening of the play was stunning.
Yes,
and
I
I
agree.
think it was, if you remember back in, what was it, towards the end of 2020 or early 2021, where it was big news in all of Singapore that creatives are non-essential. That entire opening scene was an homage, an ode, a dedication to that horrible attitude that came out during the pandemic.
Yep.
And it was such a stunningly performed scene by Ebi Shankara. Ebi, that scene was marvelous. Really, kudos to you. It really set the tone that I thought the play was going to go for the rest of the play. Unfortunately, it didn't, in my opinion. But that really was hard-hitting at the beginning.
I agree, and I think that goes into the next part of this adaptation. Was one of the things as a musician and director is I did like the attempt to act to musicianship in the show.
Yes.
For me, I don't think we see it enough. I remember when I did A Spoonful of Sherman,
brilliant.
and
Yes.
it was acting musicianship on stage. It is so tough, and finding performers that can play instruments and perform the show that you need them to perform is very tricky. It is possible, but I think the attempt at using acting musicianship here was very much to underscore the story and be the heartbeat of the story. And actually, good sound design in plays is essential, because it's like a movie. It becomes a movie
Yes.
soundtrack. And I think I see the creative vision here, and kudos to Jing for that vision of developing that soundscape throughout the show. And it did echo some of the writing, and actually it made it more interesting in places for me. However, and that takes us into our next category for me. It means you have to hire certain people with certain skills, especially musicianship skills, to perform those roles. So your casting bracket of who you can cast for a play like this suddenly shrinks.
Right,
And
yes.
I think in there lie some of the inconsistencies with the performances we saw on stage today. Fantastic musicians, but there was moments today that in a play like this, when it is about realism and naturalism, the detail of the performance is the thing that will make or break this show.
Yes, I quite agree.
And going back to many years ago when I learned all of my Stanislavski trainings, the detail of performances and characters and every choice that you make on stage as an actor, that is what naturalism is all about.
Yes, of course.
I
Yes.
felt like at times, quite a bit actually on stage today, I didn't get that level of detail from every single character on stage. And that to me is where, if you're gonna produce a play like this, it has to be so detailed, and it did feel like it was missing that from some of the characterizations today.
There is one where I thought it was delivered and was consistent, and that is with Selma, who was the big sister of the three, because consistently throughout the performance, she gave that big sister energy. I have a big sister, and I just resonated with the way she behaved around the other sisters and around the brother, and Selma really stood out for me. There was real consistency in her performance tonight.
I did find actually today, just as a nitpicky note, and I hope this can improve throughout the run, a limited run actually, which I was very
Yes,
surprised about. We'll get
interesting,
onto
yes.
that later. But some of the diction really dropped. There was a couple of actors in particular that I just found mumbling words, and I did find overall the sound levels of the microphones, I was struggling to hear quite a lot.
Yes.
But I couldn't pick up whether it was a leveling of sound or an energy from the cast.
Yes.
And I couldn't, it just felt like the energy wasn't coming off the stage in terms of the sound of the piece.
And we were in stalls.
Yes.
And there was a couple of times where I'm like, what'd you just say? And again, that also relates to pacing. Have you just said a key detail about something that I'm supposed to know about? So something in delivery or sound or balancing the two, which anybody who's worked as a sound designer knows it's tough. But a note there, a note.
Yeah. Shall we get onto the set and the lighting?
Yes. So when we came in,
please say your comment when you sat down, please.
I'm going to be very, very honest here. When we came in and sat down, I said, "Oh, you can see the back of the stage." And what did you say?
I said, of course you can.
And you called it open staging.
I said, yeah, it's an open stage. It's a kind of a better stage. You can see into the nuts and bolts of the theatre. You can see the rafters. You can see the booms at the side. You can see the lights.
And I didn't like it. I'm sorry. I didn't like it, but I didn't like it at the beginning. I appreciated it later on, especially because on the right of the stage, you had the characters that were not on stage, still doing something, and still doing something related to their character, and your gaze often went over to them for some reason or another, and that's when I really began to appreciate the stage a lot more. Also, the design, I think this was where they were trying to mix pay ode to the Chekhovian Russian origin of the play, but also add that Singaporean local shop house, Jew chat kind of aesthetic to it, which I really liked.
Absolutely, but I think my thing is we never quite knew where we were in the play, and I'm sure that was intentional, but also very annoying as an audience because it at times felt Singaporean, then it wasn't, but it was general somewhere in Asia is basically what they were trying to go with. However, Yusian, who is the set designer and always the set designer here at Pangdemonium, there might not have been detail in the acting at times, but the detail in the set, absolutely stunning.
Yes.
The thought that has gone into that. He has understood the assignment, absolutely. That kind of what the action happening off stage and still being able to see that, and having it, like that it's bare, it's not perfect, life isn't perfect, and we see elements of the kind of inside world, but then you can see what's going on outside, but it's not the feature. The mundane is the feature. That set design was stunning, with 3 columns for the 3 sisters, those nods to the Asian architecture with the windows, and then also just the little subtle set pieces that were used. It just drew us into it, and I love Yusia's designs, and I think this is actually one of my favorites. And I did love that outside-inside element, and it really also showed James Tan's, the lighting designer's, beautiful work as well, because you saw all of the lights raw, and they were there, and it really added to making this world come alive. So as a pair, I really hope, even after Pangdemonium, that you two can still collaborate together, because you are a dream pairing when it comes to production design.
There's something that I want to add on to that, and it's something that I always like. I love props. Oh, do I love props.
You do.
And there was loads of props being used throughout this performance. However, I do have a little bit of a read.
Oh, go on then.
A little note is liquids. Now, in all the theatre that I have watched, it's a directorial or production choice whether you're going to use liquids on the stage or not. I've seen it used, I've seen it not used. However, if you're going to be very specific and detailed in the props, go all in. Because there was a moment where strawberries involved. They were real strawberries because one of the actors ate them. Going into champagne that did not exist.
Yep.
Now, anybody who's worked in a bar, anybody who's done a celebration, anyone who's popped a cork knows that when you pour a glass of champagne, you can't just go, whoo, there you go. It takes time because the bubbles are going to go whoo, as you're pouring it in. And again, related to pacing, some of the actors were just and it took us out of that realism.
What you have picked up there, Sam, is what I spent hours at drama school having to work with a prop that didn't have something in it. I remember my acting teachers teaching me how you hold a cup, how you pour it for mime and also for prop work. It's something as an actor we learn for hours and hours and hours at drama school. And for me, when we're working in a naturalistic setting, when everything is supposed to be naturalistic, there was no need for there not to be liquids in the glasses on stage.
It was just noticeable.
I was slightly annoyed by it, and I think, and it did show those moments where the detail from the actors picking up a glass. How do you do that when there's nothing in? That requires a lot more skill.
Yes.
Fine
yes.
if you don't have the liquids, but there should be lots of detail in how you're working with that prop if
Yes.
there isn't a liquid in there.
Yes.
And that's where it drops a little bit.
Costume.
With
With the wonderful Leonard Augustin Chu. Now, as soon as I heard that it was Leonard Augustin Chu, I was excited because he always delivers. Any production that he's involved in, I've always been wowed by his costumes. And in this production, he really did deliver again. In a way that I thought was very clever. Is because his choices in hues and in material, I felt really complemented, was really in synergy with the set design. I thought they worked really well, and there's some really interesting choices for all of the three sisters. There were consistency in the colors, and it matched their temperaments, and I thought there were some really interesting choices there. What did you think of costume?
I do think there was a couple of costumes that did confuse me a little. For example, the tracksuit, the short shorts that she was wearing at one point just didn't go with the other costumes around at that point.
Sure.
And there was a couple of other moments I just didn't quite know what world we were in, and I think that was a confusion of the script as well. Where am I set? Where am I going? However, they were beautiful, but there was just times I was a bit confused. I wouldn't say I disliked the costumes. I just think sometimes it took me into that world where I don't know what I'm watching.
Fair enough. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, as you know by now, when TJ and I see a production, we always give it a rating out of 5 spoonfuls. But we never reveal how many spoonfuls we are going to give until the moment has come. And that moment is now. So on the count of 3, TJ. 1, 2, 3. 2.
Same.
We are the same, but we are on the lower end of the scale for a Pangdemonium production. So, TJ, why for you is it a 2?
I think all the things we've just spoken about, I think for me it was lacking a bit of detail. It was a little bit confusing in terms of the storyline, and generally I just found I was working very hard, and I don't mind working hard in the theatre, but I feel like I was working in ways I shouldn't have been working in terms of trying to work out what's going on. So I just think it was lacking a bit too much detail in the performances. However, the on stage and the visuals and the spectacle of it was beautiful, and that absolutely honestly was a 5 out of 5 for me in terms of the visuals, but it was the actual piece that brought it down for me. Yourself?
I'm more or less in the same place, like the production, the set design, the costume, some standout performances from Ebby and from Selma, but it was just the plot for me. I struggled, I didn't know where it was going at times, and the pacing of the plot, again, made me work too hard as an audience member. So sadly, that's why it's a 2 for me.
Absolutely. So this production is playing here at the Victoria Theatre from the 6th to the 15th of March.
Yes.
So you don't have long to catch it. So make sure, if you would like to come and catch it, you can go over to the Pangdemonium website or bookmyshow.com to snag your tickets. Pangdemonium's next show that's coming up is A Mirror. So that is coming up in June and July. So have a look out for that as well.
Right, my tea's gone cold, love. Shall we leave it there?
Yes, let's.
So that's cheerio from us. We'll be back soon.
And a ta-ra from me.
And to the cast and crew of Pangdemonium's Force Majeure.
And anyone else performing in Singapore Theatre,
Break a leg.